And I'm standing really tall, tall, tall. I'm more than a conqueror. More than a conqueror. With my back against the wall. Push them way up in the air now. Let me see the overcomer them. Come let me see the overcomer them again. Let me see the overcomer them. Let me see the overcomer them again. Let me see the overcomer them. Let me see the overcomer them. Let me see the overcomer them again. Let me see the overcomer them. Overcomer, overcomer, put your hands up. You better put your hands up. Overcomer, overcomer, put your hands up. And you push them way up, Joe. Let me see the overcomer them. Come back to see the overcomer them again. Let me see the overcomer them. Come back to see the overcomer them again. Let me see the overcomer them. Let me see the overcomer them again. Let me see the overcomer them. I'm alone. And I'm standing really, really tall. I'm more than a conqueror. More than a conqueror. More than a conqueror. I'm alone.
Mic check.
Positive, Christina Rochelle. You see many other plans of a man's heart, but it is the purpose of the Lord that prevails. Purpose supersedes plans. Purpose more important than plans. Say I was always smiling in the morning, like bright sunshine. But deep down inside, I felt I was losing my mind. Too much time wasted, tired, frustrated. On the 95, procrastinated. The revelation started to hit me. My spirit start talk, so me calling it me. I hear purpose, darling, stop procrastinating. No more stalling. I hear purpose, darling, victors with the cries up. No more victim. I hear purpose, darling. In this world, not of the system. I hear purpose, calling. Renew my mind, straight kingdom living.
Two roads before me, which one to choose? People's opinion make me confused. Thank God for the process, now me can't lose. Abide by the precepts and stick to the rules. Cause when purpose stand up in your life, impossible divide, possible multiply. I'm stepping towards my destiny, cause I know you have something planned for me. Yeah.
Darling, stop procrastinating. No more stalling. I hear purpose. Darling, victors with the cries up. No more victim. I hear purpose, darling. In this world, not of the system. I hear purpose, darling. Renew my mind, straight kingdom living.
All right. Good evening, everybody. We are here again on this virtual platform. The final day of 2021 virtual workshop from the JCDC. And we have started a relay. On Monday, we have our chef, Christopher Brown, walking us through our knife skills techniques. And on Tuesday, he still hold on to that baton and he did some garnishing techniques. And on Wednesday, you find three of us running that leg. Myself, Chef Brown, and Chef Sweeby. And today, I'm sure everybody is just waiting to see what will happen on the final day, cake decorating. And I know that most persons want to learn how to decorate a cake. Today, I have a young lady. She is passionate about her craft. Very unique in her presentation. She's so humble in what she does. Denise Cargill started as a home economics teacher at the Arden High School. But that wasn't her passion, even though she lectured part-time at the B&E Catering and Institute. That wasn't her passion. Her passion was to work with people and to show persons that you don't have to know how to do a particular technique. But once you get to Denise, she will have your fears just go through the window. So today, my friends, those on Zoom, those on Facebook, we are going to be watching Denise Cargill demonstrating a lot of techniques to us, and of which on competition day, you will be asked to do 3 as you would look in the handbook and see the techniques that you're asked to do. So I want you to sit back, I want you to relax, and I want you to take note of what will happen today. So put your hands together as we make welcome Denise Cargill.
Take it off. Okay, thank you, Miss Jerry, for that fine introduction. And I hope I'll be able to do justice to this relay and finish strong like Usain Bolt. So thank you all for joining in today. And today we'll be running through, as Miss Jerry said, a number of techniques which you'll be asked to perform on your entrance piece that you'll be doing for the competition. So I'll be going through with you on marbling your fondant, paneling your cake. Some of these techniques might be new to some of you, and others of you might be well familiar with them. So as I said, marbling the fondant, paneling the cake, we'll be doing stenciling, brush embroidery, and also some string work using our royal icing. So thank you for joining again, and we're gonna get right into it. So I'm gonna start off by kneading my fondant. We always want to knead our fondant just before we use it to ensure that it is nice and smooth and pliable. And today I am working with my homemade fondant. So it's my fondant I've made myself just a couple of days in advance. And so now I am kneading it until it is smooth. Once it is smooth, we want to form it into a ball. We want the smooth side to be up so that once we roll out, you won't have any imperfections visible. You can also rub your surface with a little shortening, which will help your fondant to, remain soft and pliable, and it will also delay the drying time. We want to now dust our surface with some cornstarch. I like to roll out on cornstarch. Others of you might prefer to roll with icing sugar, or it could be a combination of icing sugar and cornstarch. So I start by rolling, and you want to ensure that you're rolling all the way across your surface. You also want to lift to ensure that it's not sticking, so your fondant must remain moving. I'm going to be covering this, my 10-inch dummy. I'll be using this 10-inch dummy, so I'm going to be covering the top with this fondant. So you might be wondering, it might look a little small. I think this might be about a half a pound of fondant, but it's just the top that I'll be covering with this color, because remember I said that we'll be paneling, so we'll be doing it in 2 pieces. 1 piece for the top, and the rest will go around the side. So I'll be doing a solid color on the top, and then I'll marble So I'm just making sure that it's not sticking. Right, so I was saying that we're going to be using the solid color on the top, and then we'll be marbling another piece to use around the sides. So as I said, we want to make sure it's not sticking. At this point, if you notice any air pockets, because of the kneading of the fondant, you might have little air pockets. So you want to prick with your pin. You want something with a very fine that will not show up in your fondant. So you just want to release those air bubbles using a pin or a needle. You might want to roll again just to get rid of any lines that might be in your fondant. Now, if you had a cutter, for example, this metal cutter, which will cut through your fondant and give you a nice, clean, sharp edge, you could use that. However, you might not be privileged to have one of these, because I don't have one in a 10-inch here with me now. This is just a 6-inch. And the measurement of my cake across the diameter is 10 inches. So what I'll be doing is I'll be using this cake board as my template to cut the fondant. I'll also be using an upside down method to cover this cake. So I want to now, you can use a very sharp knife. You want to hold it in place, and you can cut around. You could also use a pastry wheel or a pizza cutter, if that works better for you. But you want to ensure that you're holding it straight, that you're getting a straight cut down, and it's not angled, to the side, which will cause your bottom section of your fondant to go under, but you'll have a straight edge. So as I said, in preparing our dummy to receive our fondant, what I did was to do some shortening over the surface. You could also mist with a little water. If you were working on a real cake, you would want to make sure that your surface is tacky enough, and you want to ensure that the whole thing is moistened, so that if there are any dry spots, what will happen is that when you put your fondant over, it will cause an air pocket to form there. So you want to make sure that your whole surface is moistened. You could also use, if it's a real cake, you could probably soften up some jam and brush over. I'm just drying up back my board to ensure that the fondant doesn't stick to the surface. Okay, so I'm removing my template, and I'm going to be turning this down. I probably want to use my palette knife to ensure that it will lift. It's still not tacky enough. So I'm just going to be rubbing some shortening on this surface to make sure that the dummy cake picks up on. Okay, it's giving me a little bit of an issue, but we have to show the cake who is the boss. So if one thing doesn't work, you just resort to another. So once we have it on the top, you want to ease it in. You can also use your smoother to smooth it out. I want to bring in, because some parts have stretched a little, some parts have not come out all the way to the edge. You want to ensure that it's flush with the edge of the cake, right? So you want to make sure that right here meets, because we're going to be putting on the other piece of fondant around the sides. So we want it to connect, to fuse with the top edge. So I'm just pushing in all the way around to ensure that it will join with it. Okay, to get my color, I just needed paste color. So the color that you use, it's really up to you. You can use whatever works for you, whatever is available wherever you are, your location is. So I'm just smoothing and getting it nice and even. So now, once we're satisfied with that, I want to re-knead this piece of fondant, and I always like to keep my fondant covered. So I would wrap it back in my plastic. Here we go. And treat your fondant with respect, right? Because it will dry out, especially if you're in an air-conditioned room. The fondant will definitely dry out much more easily. Right, so before I work on the piece for the marbling, I'm just gonna grab my brush and with some Tylose glue, which is made from Tylose and water. I'm not finding my glue. So I'm just gonna be using some water. Here we go. Right, so I was saying about the Tylose glue, which is some Tylose powder, which is your edible glue. It comes in the form of a powder. And I just dissolve it in some water. And I'm just brushing on the top edge of my cake to ensure that the other piece of fondant will adhere to it. So I'm brushing all the way around. Now you remember I said that we were going to be doing the upside down method of paneling. So at this point, what I want to do is, you might want to, your surface might be still a little tacky from handling and from the shortening and all of that. So what we want to do is to cover with a bit of cling wrap. You want to make sure that it is stretched out so the crease from the cling wrap doesn't imprint on your fondant. So you want to be patient and stretch that out, okay? Then I'm going to be using a cake board, just a regular board. I'm using a fancy one here today, but it doesn't have to be this fancy. It could be just a regular board. And what I'll do is to just flip it down, flip it over. Now you might want to secure the plastic underneath your board to ensure that it doesn't get in your way as you work. So it could have been a little bigger so that I could fasten it all the way around, but nevertheless, I will manipulate. So now that this is ready, we also want to ensure that the sides are tacky enough. So if it has dried out a bit, you could also just rub some more shortening on your hands, mix with a little water, and moisten the sides of your cake. Now you might be wondering, what if it were a real cake? Could I flip it upside down like this? Yes, you can. The weight of the cake will be distributed through, across the thing. So once you put something flat on it and flip it over, the weight will be distributed and you won't have to worry. All right. So now I'm going to be kneading my other pieces of fondant that I'll be using for my marbling technique. And for the marbling, you can decide how many colors you want to mix together. But again, you want to always start with your fondant freshly kneaded. Because if one is kneaded and is smooth and the other one isn't, when you try to combine them together, you'll find one cracking up and your outcome might not be as smooth as you'd want it to be. So just to show you quickly, if you were to use just one color, for example, this is just some brown. I'm working with earth tones today. So if you were to just, and the amount of marbling that you would get would be dependent on how many colors, like I said, the amount of color you add, and how much you manipulate your dough, your fondant, your sugar paste. So if you wanted to stop here, you could still, let me just show you. See? I don't know if you're able to see that on camera. We have a beautiful marbled effect here, just from using the two colors, right? If you wanted to go further, you could add Let's add a little bit of yellow or a little bit of green. So I'm just touching, this is just some yellow coloring. I like to mix my own colors because you know that colors come from, all of the colors come from the 3 basic primary colors. So you can always go, so I'm just adding a little bit. I think this is a little red powder that I did mix together to get a deep burgundy. And you can twist it up again. And you can stop at any point. Any point you can stop. Just with your cornstarch to make sure it's not sticking, and you roll again. And here we have, just with a little bit, we have introduced a little another color. So you can see deeper tones of the reddish brown as well as the yellow coming up in a nice marble tone. But however, now this would not be enough to do our side. So what I want to do is to add some solid brown and maybe some, this is a cream or bone white color that I use to color the base that will be, this cake will be going on top of. So in order to have it all coming together nicely as one unit, I want to keep this color as well. You could also, just to show you another way, you could roll just some logs, depending on the amount of colors that you have, that you wanted to put in on your cake. You could just roll those in logs. If you want to introduce a little bit of white to help to sober up things, we could do that as well. This is just some white. And you could put it at different parts. Then what we do, we can twist all of this together, twist it together. And like I say, you can stop at any point and you can roll. And you see, you get a different kind of marbling as it relates to, as it compares to this one. You can turn the side over to see which side you prefer, right? Good, so what I'll do now, just to show you that, I mean, anything works when it comes to marbling. So you mix your colors as how you want to, and we'll work with it. The only thing I have to tell you to guard against is that you need to just ensure that they are all kneaded together and is smooth, because if one is dry and cracking, then it will cause the whole thing to get a little mushy. So what I'm going to be doing is I want to be covering the sides of my cake. So in order to get the measurement, you would have measured with your tape measure the distance around, that would go out, circumference, okay? And we want to roll the fondant so that it will cover that measurement. So we want to measure the height of our cake. So I'm measuring, and this is just a little bit above 4 inches because the dummy itself was 4, and then with so it's about 4 1/8. So I will go a little higher to accommodate any kind of settling and changing in my measurement as I move the fondant. So I want to roll. And again, you want to lift to make sure it's not sticking. I just want to flatten it down. And if you don't have a tape measure, what you could do is, if you have a string, you could measure the string around and then stretch that out on your ruler, if you have a ruler, to tell you what's the measurement of your fondant. And I'm loving this pattern that I'm seeing here. I hope you're able to see it all. I'm just lifting to make sure it's not sticking, but I'm hoping that you're able to see. Well, when it's on the cake, you'll be able to see it. We can look at the other side too to see which side you prefer. So we're just getting it a little longer. Right. You want to measure to make sure that it is, so I'm more than 5 inches at my narrowest section. I'll just use my ruler to straighten my edge. I want to move it forward to me. Yeah. Okay, I just get it a little wider so that I'll be able to neaten my edges. Just a little longer. Okay. Then I'll use my longer ruler to measure. I think I need to be about 36. Now, when I'm at home and I will have to estimate. So I'm showing you then. You would grab your towel if that's what you have available, because I use what I have, so I'm not finding my tape measure. So I'm going to use this to go around. Hope you're able to see. So I'm going to estimate halfway then. I am a very practical person, so this is about halfway. In the center where you can all see me. Just show you when you're at home, you use what you have. What's that you have in your hand? A towel, okay? Grab the towel, put it around. This is about halfway the cake. So I've held it to here. So from here to here is halfway the measurement. And I'm gonna put my ruler. Right, so that's about 18. So the full length, I need about 36 inches to go all the way around. So I am a little short. So I'm gonna be rolling a little more to get it a little longer because we don't want to come up short. I prefer to be longer than too short. So I'm just rolling out a little more. Bear in mind too that your fondant will stretch a little bit when you're applying it. So I can bear that in mind as well. Just a little bit more cornstarch. Be generous with your cornstarch. Well, I am usually generous with my cornstarch to make sure that the fondant doesn't stick to the surface. So I'm gonna measure again. 31. As I said, it will stretch somewhat during application. I'm just using the ruler to straighten the edges, which will reduce the amount of trimming that I will have to do. I'm gonna switch to my smaller pin, which will roll it out quicker for me because it applies more pressure. So it will get me to where I need to be quicker. All right, so I think we should be there now at the 30, more like a 34, so that it doesn't have to stretch too much to cover. All right, so what I'll do now, as I said, I like to straighten up with the ruler. Then I'm gonna put it on top, hold it in place. You can also use the edge of your table, as long as it's straight, as a guide, to help you to straighten and for you to know if you are actually straight, or if one end is up a little too high. So you can check the distance from here to here, here to here, so you'll know that you're more or less in a straight line. So that I've straightened the edge, I've neatened the edge of the fondant. I now I'm gonna do it at 4.5 inches to allow for a little bit of shrinkage. So I'm just putting a mark there, another one here, and to this side, 4.5. Then I put my ruler all the way from end to end. You want to make sure you're connected with all of your dots. All of your dots, and then we're cutting across. There we go. And I'm just taking up the excess, kneading it up and wrapping it back in the plastic so that it doesn't dry out. Because remember, we don't want the fondant to dry out. You can neaten your edge at this point, or if you want to, especially if you're not sure if it will reach, then you might want to leave any excess on. Now to get it onto the cake, what I like to do is to roll it up, and this is just a regular paper roll, the paper that's insert from your paper towel. So you can roll it up. You want to make sure that your top is dusted with cornstarch, and I'm going to roll it up on the paper towel, the roll. You could use a piece of PVC pipe, or you could use your small rolling pin. The only thing is, it tends to get a little heavy, so it might squash your fondant. But with practice, you will develop your comfort zone. So here we have it all rolled up and ready to unroll onto our cake. So I'm gonna bring back my cake over. As I said, we want to make sure that the sides are tacky. So I'm just misting it again with a little water. We don't want too much that it oozes down. I'm just rubbing my hand to distribute to ensure that the whole surface would be wet. We could use a brush as well to just brush that over. Then I'll be applying, unrolling my fondant onto the surface. So you want to make sure it's connected. Make sure you're able to see. And we're just unrolling onto our cake. And of course, I'm saying my prayers, hoping that it will, and we have more than enough. We want to make sure that our plastic, remember I was telling you that I should have made sure that the plastic was fastened down so that it doesn't get entangled with our, see, we're all the way around. You just want to hold that in place. You want to grab your knife, or we could use a bench scraper, which will guarantee you a straight cut. And we just want to press through, cutting through both layers. What I did was to cause it to overlap. So to get your perfect join, once you allow it to overlap and you cut through both pieces, then the next step would be to remove the two excess pieces. So I'm removing this top layer and I'm removing this bottom piece. You can use your knife to ensure that that part goes in. You can use your brush with a little of your Tylose glue just to brush on the edge of the cut piece so that they will fuse together. And it should come together to form a perfect seam. Now, if you want to get rid of that line, what you could do is to soften up some of your fondant in the dominant color. And just once this is dried, you can press it into the seam, the join. I refer to the join as the seam. So you can go around with your knife to ensure that your edge is flat, right? We'll use our smoother to go around to ensure that no air is trapped underneath and everything is nice and smooth. So there we have it. Our side is now covered. We have a little excess here on the top. So you can use your very sharp paring knife, or you can use the name is evading me. That artist tool, Oh Lord, my hands are. Yes, that artist tool, a very sharp knife. I'll get back to you, your stencil knife. And just to cut inwards. Let me come this way. You're cutting inwards. And that will guarantee you a straight, flat surface. Now, if it was a real cake, this would have been the the board, because this would have been the bottom of the cake. So you would have covered your cake on a board. I always like to cover each cake on a board that is the same exact size as the cake. And then when you coat with your coating, if it's for a fruit cake, it would have been like your almond paste. And if it's a light textured cake, like your vanilla cake, you would have coated with some buttercream. And you would want your buttercream and your board to come out flush, so that you would now cover board and cake as one unit. Okay, so now we're ready to turn it over. And I'll just place my board and I'll turn over. And it would release. Now, you will have a seam again at the top where the two pieces of fondant connected, right at the edge here. You would notice that there is a join. Once you would probably do this like a day or two in advance, and once it has set, you could soften up some of your fondant. We would just mix a little of the fondant because we want the same color. So I just use a little water to soften some up, so that you're making like a little spackle paste, more like a little filler. You know, the carpenters use fillers. So we do use filler as well in our cake art. And then you use that now to fill out any join that that might seem unsightly to you. Remember, I said though that this would work better when the coating is, the fondant is set, so that you could wipe the knife against it without disturbing your fondant. So I was just doing that just to show you how you would conceal any raw edge that you have at your join. Another thing that you could do would be to put a little roll of icing using your same fondant. If you had a glue gun, no, sorry, not a glue gun, a clay gun. You know, the ceramists use a clay gun, and to show you how the different arts overlap each other, we also use that same clay gun to press out our very firm paste. I'm looking for a section of my surface that's not too dry, because in order to do this, the surface can't be too much cornstarch can't be on it, or it will just flatten. So what I would do is, you're kneading up your paste. You always want to start with your paste, your fondant kneaded, and then I'm rolling on the surface. And then once it is small enough, then you can move to your smoother, and you're using your smoother with a light touch, and you would be rolling to get it thin. So just in case you don't have that tool, the clay gun, or there's another name. I'll soon tell you what it is. I'll get back to that. But you'd roll with your smoother until it is to the length that you want. And again, you would brush with some glue right on the edge, right along your edge, and you would lift, and you will apply to conceal that edge. Just to show you the different ways that you can tidy up your work so it doesn't look unsightly. Not that this looks very bad, but for those of you who want to have a finished look, these are just some of the ways that you would do it. So you want to place a roll of your fondant just on the edge, which provides you with a neater finish. So our next step now would be So I've completed the paneling of the cake and also the marbling technique already. So our next thing that we'll have to do now is to complete our stenciling on the cake. I need to finish this corner. But for our stenciling, you would select your pattern. There are many patterns available for your stenciling. So you can pick up your stencils from, well, nowadays everything is available online, but from your art stores, if you purchase your stencils from a cake supply store, it might be a little more expensive than if you were to purchase it from the art and craft stores. So sometimes you can look just from your general art supplies store to find a pattern that might fit in with the particular theme that you're working with. You can also make your own stencils, depending on the project that you're working on. Okay, so I'm just doing a longer piece so I can finish up. I'm going to remove this one because this piece was just too short. And then I'm going to brush again with some glue and apply the whole thing. Okay, so in preparation for your piece for the competition, you need to be thinking about your colors, your color scheme that you'll be working on, and putting together your different techniques, making sure that they all work together and come together to form a very pleasing outcome. So I started at the back where the join is. If it gets a little dry, we just want to apply some more glue right on the edge. Right along the edge. And again, where it overlaps, in order to produce a inconspicuous join, what we can do is we're going to make it overlap again, but we want to do it right because this will form the back of the cake. So you want to slant your knife and you're cutting through, and then you're removing both pieces. Just need to cut it through a little harder. But the surfaces are soft. Now remember, you would have done this in advance, so your fondant would have firmed up a bit so that it can take a little bit more handling. You want to, again, put a little glue at the edge. I have to stretch it a little bit. Apply a little bit more glue. Right, and we form our seam. You can use your smoother just to make sure that you're evening it out. Just like that. Okay, so here we have it now. We have finished this, our paneling, and as I said, we did our upside down method of paneling. Now, what we're going to be doing next is that we have our stenciling to do, which we're going to be doing on our bottom tier, which I've already covered, and also the stenciling, we have to complete the brush embroidery, and also our string work. So right now I'm going to be showing you how you would get your pattern, the pattern, your outline for your stencil, how you get it imprinted on your surface. Now what you do is you would select your pattern. I'm sorry. You'd select your pattern. And once you have selected your pattern, you would trace it onto some wax paper or grease paper, which we did here. So you would trace it onto your wax paper. I had the copy. Should be somewhere here, yes. So you would find the pattern that you like, or your client. Let's say it's a wedding, for example, and the client wants this particular flower on her cake. You would find the pattern, and then what you do is you would trace it, blow it up to the size that would fit on the cake that you're going to be doing. And it can be on the top or it can be on the side. And once you blow it up, then we would put it down on our surface. I'll be using some pins to hold it in place. And then I'll be using another pin to prick our pattern through. You want to position the cake as well, the pattern as well, so that it will enhance your cake. So the stems flow to the back. So I've positioned the stem here towards the back. Then as I said, you want to secure the pattern onto the surface using pins. Then I'm using my 2 fingers to hold the paper in position. And then I'm just going to be pricking close together, just doing some pin pricks in order to transcribe my pattern onto the cake. Now, this is not the only way that you could get your pattern onto your cake. I've done it on this one, which is the one that I'll be doing the brush embroidery on. But you could also, let's say you have a flower cutter. If there's a flower cutter that you could use, or you could, if you have a flower cutter already that has the kind of demarcation that works for you, that might be an easier way for you to get your pattern onto your cake. As I said, this one might be a little, take a little bit more time. So I just want to show you again how you could get your pattern onto your cake. Of course, if you're an artist, if you have that kind of skill, you can also use an edible marker, edible pen. You could freehand draw your design on your cake. That's also would be a very time-saving method. But I'm going to be using my cutter. This is a peony cutter, but it's a single petal. So I'm just going to be using here. This will be the top of your cake. So you want to, before your fondant sets to dry, you would just you can use your cutter to help you to create your own pattern. So these would represent the outer petals, like we have on our flower here. And then you want to stagger it. So you want the other one to come maybe between where those two petals overlap. You want to do a next set of inner petals coming around. And of course, you can always look around your home to see what there is, what is there that I could use that could give me a similar pattern that I'm looking for. Sometimes things are right there in front of us that we can improvise and to use. You can also use your tool to finish creating your flower. So what I'm in fact doing here is making a flower that I will be doing my brush embroidery on. I did the pin method to get it onto this cake, which I'll do, but I was showing you how I would have gotten it onto the top of the cake that I covered earlier, this one. So you could have, like I said, trace your pattern onto your wax paper, and then using your pin, you could prick it through. Or if you have a cutter that could give you all your lines, all your outlining marks, you could just press that into your surface and that would have been fine. Or you could, like I just did, create your own thingy. And then what we'll do in the middle now is create the center of our flower, and we could just finish it up with some beads once we have finished typing in our lines and doing the airbrush. I'll just set this aside and we'll see if we get around to doing an airbrush. I keep saying airbrush, it's a brush embroidery, I'm sorry. Brush embroidery on our cake. Right, so I'll just set these aside. Now, I'll be working on, like I said, we'll be doing a 2-tiered cake. So this is going to be our top tier, which is a 10-inch. I'm just setting this aside for the time being. And what I want to be doing now is to come over to this 12-inch cake that I covered earlier. So we'll be doing some stenciling on this cake and also some string work at the top. Now, you might not want to do all of those on one cake. It might be a little much for one cake, but for today's class, in wanting to complete all the specified assignment, so that Miss Jerry don't have my head, I am going to be doing, because she wants all our students to be fully equipped so that you see all her techniques showing up on your competition cakes. So we'll be doing stenciling down the bottom, then we'll do some drop strings along the side, the top edge going around, and then I'll finish up with a little piping with my royal icing. Maybe when we finish, we'll look at it to see how much more we need to do. So for now, what I'll be doing is I'll be putting in my marks for which will divide this cake, so I'll know where to place my string work. I'm going to be doing that before I put on the stencil, because we don't want any damage to be done to our stenciling once we have completed it. So we're going to be dividing the cake in 16. So what I have here is my cake dividing chart. Now, if you don't have access to one of these, you can also make one, because for years I used one that I made. What you do, you can use a sheet of grease paper, wax paper, and you get it to the biggest diameter that you can. And then you fold it in half, fold it in 4, fold it in, fold it 4, fold it up again, and then fold it again. And then once you crease those edges, and when you open it up, it will divide the cake in the up to maybe about 16. Then you can put in your lines and use that as your cake dividing chart, right? So for now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm looking for all of the marks all of these marks that have 16, now you'll notice that there are other numbers on the chart, but all of them share this, they have this line in common. So you're not putting the mark at the point where the number is, but you're actually using the line. Sometimes I've seen, students make that error and they use the position of the number, but we're not using the position of the number, we're using the line. So we're looking for all the lines with 16. So I'm going to be using a straight edge, which you want to put against the side of the cake, make sure it's perpendicular to the side. And then I'm just using my tool. You can use a toothpick or a skewer or something with a point to put in a little mark that you are able to see. Just big enough so you can see it. You don't want to make too much of an indent. So just make sure that you're able to see all the 16. So I'm dividing. I hope you're all excited about cake decorating as I am. I know how interested you all can be and how rewarding a craft this whole thing is when you are able to do a cake and see the outcome and your client is quite pleased. It does bring a feeling of great satisfaction. Okay, so I'm just, as I said, just dividing the cake in 16, putting in all my dots. You want to make sure that it hasn't shifted. To guard against that, you might want to put a piece of, you could soften up a piece of fondant under your dummy to hold it in place to make sure that it's not moving around, but that it's held in place so that your markings would be accurate. And I think this might be our final one now, right? So like I said, we'll be dropping our strings. We have a mark here that's an imposter. So what you can do so that you don't get, it doesn't confuse us, we can fill it in with a little bit of our fondant, of course, in the same color so that it doesn't, throw off our work. So we have divided the cake in 16, just on the top edge, as I said, where we'll be placing our drop strings using our royal icing. So I just wanted to get those markings out of the way, but we're not going to be doing the drop string just now. At first, I'm going to be doing our stenciling on our cake. So for our stenciling, now, okay, before I get to my stenciling, I'm telling you about stenciling, right? I had covered my board with some fondant. I covered my board with some fondant. And what I want to be doing here now is I'm just softening up some with a little water. And I'm just using this as a little glue, placing it in the middle of my board, which will cause my cake to stick to the surface. So I'm just softening up some, flattening it a bit, and then I'm going to be placing this down. Right, so we're going to be needing some royal icing, which is, our royal icing is a fat-free icing. It dries very hard. Once upon a time, that's what we usually use to cover the cakes and also to decorate. But it dries very hard. It dries to a candy hard consistency once it's dried, once it's exposed to air. So we not using it to cover the actual cake, we just use it in our decorations. So I've already made the royal icing. As I said, it's a fat-free icing. It's just made with royal icing, with egg whites and icing sugar. Use a little lime juice or some cream of tartar, which would be our tartaric acid. And the acid helps the egg whites to stiffen up and to peak up, and so that you get your icing nice and firm. So we're gonna take a short break. You can get your snacks, you can refresh yourselves, a little water, do whatever you need to do, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes to finish our cake with our stenciling and our string work. See you then.
Situations surround us, left and right, up and down, worries bombard us. But I just came to tell you, better yet reassure you, that God is fighting for you. Your end will be greater than your beginning. Access granted, Red Sea parted with God before you, beside you. There's no stopping you, just send up the praise. Of the praise, we're sending up the praise. We're sending up the praise. Yes, we're sending up the praise. Lift him up, lift him high, send up the praise. Yeah. Oh, we're sending up the praise. Yes, we're sending up the praise. Got that problem you just can't seem to fix. Frustration and depression is in the mix. You're backed up in a corner, just cry out to the Father and take your worship. You can overcome any situation. Lift your head up to the God of your salvation. Victory is nigh. Get ready, you know what to do. When you know the bills them due. When you know how I clue if you do. Know that God will see you through. Picking them up on you. God a blank and him can't tell you. Your destiny not one for you. Get radical, you want to fight, you want to drown. You know what to do. Never underestimate the power of your praise. Start to praise him one time. Start praising, he is waiting. Send up the praise.
Thanks and praise unto the Most High. For He's worthy of all praise, always. God be and praise, make me praise Him. Need no debating, no time wasting. In a evil, we not partaking. God be and praise, make me praise Him. Yeah. Need no debating, no time wasting. In a evil, we not partaking. Good over evil, life over death. We got our hope, so we strive for the best. As salt of the earth, we were called to preserve. We were commissioned to go on a mission. Spread the word to every division. All they all should know So many people dying of diseases. Yes, I know something must be wrong. Well, every day a new invention, guided by the hands of Satan, causing chaos and destruction everywhere we go. The chosen people, now is the time to be an example, to live your life like Christ's disciple. God be a praise, make we praise Him. Need no debating, no, no time wasting. In a evil, we not partaking. God be a praise, make we praise Him. Yeah. Need no debating, no, no time wasting. In a evil, we not partaking. Rise up, the chosen people. Now is the time to be an example, to live your life like Christ's disciple. The world needs to know. The world needs to know. God be a praise, make we praise Him. Need no debating, no. No time wasted. In a evil, we not partaking. God be a praise, make we praise Him. Yeah. Need no debating, no. No time wasted. In a evil, we not partaking. God be a praise, make we praise Him, praise Him. Need no debating, no. No time wasted. In a evil, we not partaking. God be a praise, make we praise Him, praise Him. Need no debating, no. No time wasted. In a evil, we not partaking. Make we praise Him. Make we praise Him.
Holy Spirit, work on me now, some way, somehow. Make me over again. Here I am, Lord. I want to be in your presence. Reveal to me the plans you have for me. You've been calling my name, but I keep doing the same, the same, the same. Oh Jehovah, conform my will to yours. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild, look upon your wayward child. From you I don't want to depart. Give me a worshiper's heart. Hey, gentle Jesus, meek and mild, look upon your wayward child. From you I don't want to depart. Give me a worshiper's heart. Replenish my soul. Reconnect my spirit. Consuming fire, purify my heart. I've made some mistakes. I don't deserve your grace, your grace, your grace. Blessed Savior, do not pass me by. Gentle Jesus, meek and mild, look upon your wayward child. From you I don't want to depart. Give me a worshiper's heart. If you fall down, you have to get up back again. Now wanna in a sin and make the devil teeth grin. Abba Father, give me a new song to sing. If you fall down, you have to get up back again. I may say if you fall down, you have to get up back again. Now wanna in a sin and make the devil teeth grin. Abba Father, give me a new song to sing. If you fall, get up back again. If you fall, get up back again. Now wanna in a sin and make the devil teeth grin. And if you fall, get up back again. If you fall, get up back again. Now wanna in a sin and make the devil teeth grin. Holy Spirit, please work on me now. Some way, somehow, give me a worshiper's heart.
I am in a good mood. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Early in the morning as I wake, I take myself away to a secret place. And there I lay flat on my face and wait with the only aim to see God's face. Starting my daily activities, here come the challenges, the devil presenting himself.
Mhm.
Everybody join the praise train. I'm in a praising mood. I'm in a praising mood. Lord God, I'm in a praising mood. You better move. Come make we spread the good news. I'm in a praising mood. I'm in a praising mood. Lord God, I'm in a praising mood. You better move. It seems you get the good news. Some people come at church, feel relax, and every single second them checking the clock because they mind it, they home on the pot. But I God give you the rice, the peas, and the pot. So take your mind off the things of this world. In His presence, the praise Him deserve. And me now make my move.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. That was informative. Now, as the cake doctor, that's the name that you can go on Instagram, you'll find the cake doctor. Just type it in just now. Google it and you will find Denise Cargill. Now, I should tell you that Denise Cargill is the owner and manager for Occasions Catering and Hireage. I tell you, she is very good. She goes out to the extra limb to have you learning much about fondant. So as she would go into the rest of the demonstrations, I know you will learn much before we get done at 6. So I'm going to be stepping out and allowing her to continue doing her craft. So Mrs. Cargill, welcome.
Okay, welcome back, guys. So as I said, we're going to be continuing now. We're going to be doing the stenciling on our cake. And as I was saying earlier, our stencils are available in different patterns, and you could source them from your cake supply store or just from your general arts and craft section in your department store. So once you have selected the stencil that you're going to be using, the next step would be to affix it to our cake. And this is another example of this cake over here. This is an example of a stenciling that we did earlier. Now, today I'll be using royal icing, but it doesn't mean that that's the only medium that you could use to apply your color onto your cake or your pattern onto your cake. You could use just, whether you want to use liquid color, you just want to make sure that it is pasty enough that it doesn't run and seep under your stencil, the cut sections. You could use a powdered color as well, whether you're edible chalk, your dusting powder that you'd use to color your gum paste flowers. Once it's a contrasting color or a color that will show, You could use that as well. You could use your airbrush color as well to spray your pattern onto your cake. And or your gold. You can be just as creative as you want to be, mixing your colors to add your texture to your, in the form of your stencil onto your cake. Now, we need to have this stencil. So this is a stencil that I'll be using today. I'll not be using all of it. I'm just selecting the portion that I think will fit in with the rest of my design. I'll be doing the stenciling on the bottom tier, like I said before. So what I would need to do is to affix the stencil onto the cake so that it is flush with the surface of the cake so that the icing that I'll be using does not seep under. Today I'm going to be using just some hat pins. So you want to position. So you may have to, what I did just ahead of time was to bore the surface of the stencil because it might be a little stiff. It might be a little hard to get it in while you have it on the cake. So I did that ahead of time. And then I want to just find those holes. And I am pushing right through. So that's for the top. And I'm hoping that I'll find that bottom, yes. So you want to make sure it is snug against the surface of your cake. And this is why you need to ensure that you have a smooth surface. If you have humps and bumps in your cake, it will be difficult to get a nice, smooth stenciling job on. This one is proven to be okay. There we go. Right, so as I was saying, if your surface is not smooth, the stencil will not sit snug to your surface. So this is nice and snug. So then if you have humps and bumps and curves under your cake, what will happen is that you will have buildup of icing, or it can even seep under and cause a little bit of clogging, and the icing will get a little mushy. There's another technique as well that you could use to fix the stencil onto your cake. Here I have a kind of sticky adhesive rubber band. So what you'd need to do is you'd have to, I use a very sharp knife or my brain is your stencil cutter. That's the X-Acto knife, right? And earlier I was telling you about the tool that you would use I was referring to it as a clay gun. The other name is also an extruder. So there you have it. So it's the clay gun or the extruder that you'd use to pipe your fondant because it's so stiff. The regular piping bag or your first time back in the day, they used to use the decorating gun, but that would not be sturdy enough to get out this very stiff paste. So what you'd use in that case is your extruder or your clay gun. So now what I'm doing is I just use the X-Acto blade to slit the top of the stencil, and I've threaded through this elastic. It stretches, but it's also sticky. And then, I would want to get that side in. Then because you want it to be resting flat along your cake. So if you have a regular elastic, this one came with 2 little clips. So back at home, what you could do, or let me use what you would be familiar with then. Let me use what you might be more familiar with. Would be another pin that you could use so if you're using your regular rubber band, not rubber band, elastic, our elastic band, the elastic that you purchase from the fabric store, and then you would stretch it around to this end, and then you could use one of these clips now that you pick up at your stationery store, and you would clip. Once you want to stretch so that it is taut, tight, and then you would clip so that you're slipping out. Come on. Once you would hold it together and you clip it so that it is nice and snug onto your cake, right? So that's two methods that you could use to affix your stencil onto your cake to get your pattern on. So I'll set this aside and I will come back to this one because this is the one we'll be doing today. So I told you earlier that we made a royal icing. So we're going to just rebeat. You always want to rebeat your icing. You also want to ensure that you keep your royal icing, once it is made, you want to keep it covered with a damp cloth to ensure that it doesn't dry out, because as I said, it dries very hard once it is exposed to air. So because you want it to spread smoothly, you want to ensure that it doesn't have any crystallized sugar in it. So you want to keep it covered in a damp cloth, but you always want to rebeat just before you lose. So we'll come over. So here I have it covered with a plastic wrap as well as my damp cloth. And then I'm just going to be rebeating. You want to lock your mixer bowl. And we'll just beat it for a couple seconds just to get it smooth. In keeping with okay, so this should be good enough now. So we want to stop our mixer, raise the head, and we just want to remove some of our icing. And the stenciling doesn't take a lot of icing. You want to make sure that the icing, the consistency of the icing is not too dry, but you don't want it to be too runny either, because if it's too runny, then it can seep under your and run down and smudge your stenciling work. Just covering back with my damp cloth, first with my plastic wrap to minimize the amount of air that goes to it, and then with my damp cloth. Okay, I'm going to be applying a little bit of color to the icing that I'll be using to do the stenciling. So a little bit of brown just to contrast. Well, I would have to go a shade deeper or some shades deeper so that it contrasts nicely with against the cake. So you can look at it. Don't be afraid to look at, you probably want to pick up on the same color that you have up top to help to balance it out. But it depends on how striking you want your base to be. You could go with a bolder color so that it, you know, it stands out more, it stabilizes your design. So the stronger colors, it's good to keep strong colors towards the base to help to, you know, anchor your thing. So I think this color is fine. As I say, it's up to you. If the icing seems to be a little too dry, you can just add a little bit of water just to get it to a more easier spreadable consistency. Okay, so this is now good. Switching now to a smaller palette knife that I'll be using to apply. So we're going to come back over and we're just going to apply the stencil. I'm just using the two bottom sections because right here where we have this upper one is where I'm going to complement my stencil with my string work. So instead of the stencil giving me this drape along here, I'll be using the royal icing to do that. So we just want to spread a thin layer of the royal icing in our brown along the base of the cake. Remember, we said we're just using these two sections. One other thing to bear in mind when you're doing, and then we want to smooth it up. When you're doing your stenciling, you want to ensure that like I said before, the icing is not too stiff. So we want to get off the excess. And once we get that excess off, then we have to release. So you just want to pull out your pin and let's see what pattern we have and how it works. Now, if you're not happy with it when you pull it off, you can always clean off and go again. I need to pull on these pins. And there we have our first stenciling section. Now, before I move on, the only thing now is that we need to clean up our stencil again. You always want to start with a clean stencil. So you can have just a damp cloth that you want to use to wipe your stencil clean. You also want to, it allows, why I like using a royal icing is that it dries pretty fast. So you might be wondering what will happen when you try to, continue, especially if you were using the elastic band, if the elastic band wouldn't damage this one already done, because the royal icing dries pretty fast, it wouldn't happen. If you're working with a material that doesn't dry as quickly, you just have to move on to something else on your cake and allow it to dry, rather than run the risk of smudging your design. Okay, so once we have cleaned up, we want to ensure that it is dried. So we're using some paper towel to ensure that it is nice and clean. Drying up the table. And again, you want to now position to ensure that, so you might have to go back over. Let me touch to make sure it's dry, right? See, it's dry to the touch. So I can position there. So again, we're going to be applying our pins to secure our pattern. There we go. And we're securing again here. Good. So you just want to stir again. If your icing getting a little dry, you just need to dip your knife in a little bit of water, or if you want to use egg white, since egg white is the base for it, but water is good enough to soften it up a bit again. And you want to keep this covered with a damp cloth so that it doesn't dry out. And again, we want to apply our icing all the way across. Try not to get it going in the section, but then because we're working on fondant, we can always wipe off. So you just want to clean up your excess. You don't want it to be too thick. So you want to clean off your excess. And again, we're going to remove our pins. And we just have to keep doing that until we have completely covered all the section of our cake. So we're going around, and we have to keep cleaning and doing that. Like I said, if you drop, you can always clean off. If you get any icing in places that you don't need it to be, you can always wipe your fondant with a damp cloth to remove any unwanted discolorations. So I'm just cleaning up again. And we will go again. Trying to get all our cake covered with the stenciling. As I said, if you're working with something that doesn't dry as quickly, you're working with buttercream, for example, you probably want to leave that so that it will, firm up. You definitely wouldn't want to use a rubber band over your buttercream though, but you would want to hold it in place with maybe some pins. Another thing I do sometimes is to just dampen the surface. If the surface is tacky, your stencil can just stick to it. So you might want to rub it with a little shortening or just a little bit of water, getting a little bit of pushing back there. So you want to hold it. If you have somebody else who can help you to hold it while you push against, right? Okay, manage to get that in. But here is where your kids would come in handy. They always want to help. Mommy, can I help? You say, okay, come and hold this for me. Come and hold right there. So they feel a part of the whole exercise. Right, I'm just getting this other pin in. Right. And again, you want to stir. You see if I can speed up the operation here. And then you spread it on again. So like I said, you could have used airbrush. You could have used your powder color. You could have used your paste color. You can use paper towel to pat on your color, or a sponge, a piece of sponge. Those are some of the things that you can use to apply or a dry brush if you're doing a powdered color, to apply your contrasting color to your cake. Again, I'm going to remove. And of course, if there is any part that didn't come out the way you wanted to, you can always touch up with some of your royal icing in the same color if it is very obvious that you had a little mishap. So again, we're going to clean up and try to finish up the base of our cake. And the color you use is really, up to you, whether you want it to contrast or to blend in. You can do white on white, cream on cream. It doesn't have to contrast. You can, use just about anything. Because if the background of this was white, I could have used white royal icing as well on top of it, and it would still show up nicely. Afterwards, you could always brush with some sparkle, some of that luster dust that adds a little bit of sparkle to your cake. You could do that as well. So again, I'm going to be pinning in place and going around. Seems a little dry, so I'm applying a little water. And I'm going to be spreading again. Just a little bit more here, and then we want to even it out. Spread it all the way across. If you miss a spot, then that part will not have all of the pattern. Sometimes when you're moving too fast, that is what happens. So again, we want to pull out. And maybe just one more and we'll be all done. It's quite a tedious process. So we just have to be a little patient. Some designs take a little bit more time than others. So, you know, this comes back to the matter of pricing of cakes. This is why some cakes cost more than others, because you have different kinds of designs. Some are more time consuming, more technical. So just make sure that you're charging in accordance with the demand of the pattern, the particular pattern you're doing. Okay? Right. So as I said, one more and we should be done. So I'll probably just center this one around and we'll finish at that. And I know my very perfect students will tell me, Miss, that space is too wide. And I would say, a man on a galloping horse won't notice. Yes, my students tend to be very perfect. They want everything to be measured. Not that that's a bad thing, but sometimes I tend to overlook some of the little imperfections, you might want to call them. So once your cake is nicely done, everybody won't notice all the little flaws. So don't sweat too much of the small stuff. Even though for competition, I know Miss Jerry not going to bypass and overlook anything. So not for the competition. Don't say that Miss Cargill did say we don't have to pay attention to all of the little details. For the competition, you want to try to make sure that you get it as perfect as can be, because the judges will be looking out for that. Okay, so this is our final part, and we're all done with that portion. That is our stenciling. We could probably, yes, you can look back and to see where might have a little too wide. So you could go back through and just once this whole thing is dried, you could go back through and add another one right here. So you could do that, you know, if you're not satisfied with some of the spacings, you can always make your adjustments. But we have nothing to measure here. We can continue with our cake. So here we are done now with the stenciling, and we want to move on to our string work. So I wanted to tell you that you need to plan your design and plan the way you work. I remember when we were in high school, we had to do our work schedule, plan of work. So you have to organize yourself in terms of how you approach your design so that you don't put on your string work and then you realize that you need to stencil and the stencil knocking off the string work. You want to don't put the horse before the cart. So let's do the stenciling first and then our string work, okay? So that you don't have any damage to fix afterwards. So right, that's what I wanted to tell you, to organize yourself, plan out your work so that you approach it in a methodical manner. Some things that can be done the day before, you want to do that so that you don't feel pressured on the day that you're actually doing your design. Now that I'm looking at the back of my cake, I'm seeing a join here, which we might want to, I was saying to you earlier that you could, once it is set, you could maybe soften up some icing. So you want to select the color that's closest to the actual cake. It's a marble defect, so it might be a little difficult. So maybe we don't have to worry too much about that. But you could soften up some of your paste, as I said. You just want to add a little water, and I'm just rubbing it on the surface, on my work surface, using my palette knife to make it smooth and spreadable. Then we would come to the join. Now that the icing has set somewhat, it might be easier to just apply, and you can use your fingers. You want to clean up your knife, you want to go again, and you just want to apply. And you'd go over, and you want to clean up. You could use a little bit of water now just to rub, to even off any imperfections. And then sometimes if I do that, I'm saying, boy, I don't like how that looks. what you can also do is to use a bit of your fondant. This one I had rolled out before. It might have gotten a little dry. So let me just put this to the side. So I've turned it over and I'm rolling it. It's cracking up a bit, but this is just to demonstrate to you. You would actually do it the perfect way by re-kneading your fondant, rolling it again so that you don't have these cracked edges, because once it's cracked, I use the underside because the underside would not be as dry. But this is how this side, you see how it appears cracked and look like alligator skin. So I am now using the underside, which is a little smoother. So I'm just cutting a strip here. I'm cutting it freehand, but you could also have used your ruler to ensure that it is nice and straight, because since it's tidy, we're tidying up, you want to make sure that it accomplishes the purpose for which you intended. So I'm just applying a little bit of glue, and then I'm going to use this piece. You want to make sure it's tall enough. I'm just looking at it to make sure I'm not using the wrong side, and we're just using it to cover that strip. And then we use our sharp, very sharp blade knife, and we're just cutting away the excess. You might want to go, you can look at it to see whether you prefer it stop there or you want to go it all the way around. You could probably make it come over the edge. You can decide. I think I like it. I like it like this. Right? So I've tidied it up a bit. Again, this is at the back, so it still doesn't matter. Right? So now we're going to be ready to do our brush embroidery. Now the brush embroidery, as I said, I did this as an example. I also had done this one earlier. Remember, I was showing you how you would have done it on the top of your cake. How you would have traced the pattern onto the wax paper, and then using your pin to prick through, or you could use a scribing tool, which is your needle tool, to just press on your fondant while it is still somewhat soft to imprint. When you're doing the scribing tool, you have to make sure it is still somewhat soft. And I also showed you how you could, if you can freehand do it, or use one of your flower cutters to help to create your design. But earlier, what I did was I used this pricking technique to prick through. I don't know if you're able to see that the pattern, because you might be wondering if the pin could actually do, transcribe your pattern onto your cake. Yes, it does. I'm sure you're able to see the lines outlined there. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using some royal icing to do the brush embroidery. For that, we're going to be using, I'm going to use white, or you could use a cream color, but right now we have white that would contrast with the color that is already the color of the fondant. And I'm going to be using maybe a number 3 tip, because I want my lines to show up. So I'm just attaching the coupler and the tip to my bag. Then I'm going to be getting some more white icing from my mixer bowl. So I'm coming over just to re-whip it a little bit to make sure it's smooth. Like I said before, to ensure that it is smooth, just a little beating. And then I'm putting some icing in my bag. We don't want the icing to be too dry. Again, I said if it is too dry, you want to add just a little bit of water. You want to add just a little bit of water or some egg white, just so that it's not too dry. So we're going to be applying, putting some in our bag to do our brush embroidery. You also need things in the back. And again, we want to be covering to ensure that it is not drying out. Now, for our brush embroidery, we're going to be needing, like I said, we're using royal icing. You're going to be needing some water, and you need a brush that has a very flat tip. So you don't want it angled or pointed. You want a flat, fairly firm bristle on your brush. So, yeah, so that's what you need, a flat bristle. So the bristles are flat and also cut straight, not pointed or angled. So you want to start with the outer edges of your design, the parts that are in the background or foreground. You want to start with those. So if you can identify any leaves on your pattern, now you want to refer back to your actual picture, which will help to guide you as to where you are. Because right now you might be just looking at lines and you're not able to tell what is what. So on this, I can see leaves. So you want to identify your leaves and you can pipe that in. If you wanted to do that, because the leaves would be behind the plant, behind the flower. So you want to do the leaves first. As I said, you want to do whatever is in your background first. So if you wanted to, you could have also piped in color. Let's say you wanted the green to be more, the design to be more real, because your leaves would be green. So you could do that in green. So I've piped in the outline. So I'm going to be dipping my brush. I have a little bit of color in my brush. I want to get rid of that color. So I'm just actually washing it out. For the flower, it might be okay, but for the green for the leaf, you could also use a little bit of green color in your brush to do that. So with your damp brush, you want to dip in the water, you want to wipe off some of the water, and then you're going to be stroking your icing down towards the middle of your, so not from the edge, you want to leave a little thickness on the edge, and you're stroking towards the middle of your, and that's it. So you just dip in your brush and stroking towards the middle. So you'll see the little streaks of the icing being pulled towards the middle of your design. Afterwards, if you want to, you can go back over the edge to enhance. Like I said, if you wanted to, you could also have added some color. Let's say you wanted that to be in your green. You could have piped the icing in the green, or what I'm doing here is just to use a little green on my brush. I'm using moss green and I'm just brushing that in, just to add a little bit of color to make my design look a little more realistic with actual colors. Nothing wrong with in having it, in the white, but if you also wanted to add a little bit of color, that also works. So a little green there, and then I'll be approaching the rest of the petals. Like I said, you want to go from the outer edge, and you don't want to pipe too much in at first, because you don't want it to get too dry, especially if you're working in an air-conditioned room. Your icing, because remember the royal icing dries pretty fast, although you could have added some corn syrup or some piping gel to the royal icing to delay the drying time, especially if you're working in an air-conditioned room. So I've applied some more icing, and I'm just using my dampened brush to stroke in. And you might say, what if I cover some of the lines? Well, some of the design, you can actually feel it out. Because sometimes I put in, if you're not too sure of where the lines were, then I ended up, you know, just freehand. So I'm dipping my brush in the water and I continue to stroke in my design. Stroke in. You want to keep a piece of paper towel to get rid of any icing that might build up, and you're stroking in. And when it dries, it will give you a nice, beautiful effect when you're able to see the different layers of the petals. So I'm just piping in, continue to pipe in and stroke in. Now this is a flat design onto your cake. And of course you could enhance this now by, when it's done, you could also use a 3D, a real, of course, made from sugar. One of your peonies like we have on the cake over there is the same flour. So you could use that to decorate your cake. Or I don't know how you're going to incorporate, how you can incorporate your, if you want to brush embroider 3 mangoes onto your cake for your competition. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Just throwing that out there for those of you who might want to include the mango also in your design. Right, so we have completed the outer part of our petals, now of our flower. So now we're going on the inside portion. So I'm just finding my lines. If the icing gets a little too dry, then we just remove that. And we continue to pipe in and stroke. Pipe in again. And we're stroking in. Again, if you wanted to use color for your petals, you could do so. You could have, you know, depending on what color you want to depict in your flower, you could have mixed that color in your royal icing. And, or we could have dip the color in the brush to add a little bit of color to our design. Type it in again. And we're brushing in. So it does take time to do some of your designs, but I do find cake decorating to be quite relaxing for me. I just make sure that I have nothing else to think about. I have to be focused, so I clear off my workload from everything else. And then I, all alone, sometimes in the nights, when everybody gone to bed, and I just do what I need to do. So it's very relaxing, and I know some of you can identify with that. And you just take your time and fill out your design. Remember, always brushing towards the middle. Just stroking towards the middle of your design. Leaving the edges a little thicker than the flattened side, so you can actually see the outline. You're not flattening everything. So we're coming towards the middle now. So I'm just putting in those lines and brushing those in. Hope you're able to see. Can you see? And I'm hoping that you're having as much fun watching me do it as I'm having actually doing it. I hope so. So, and when you're done now, you will go and practice. Because remember, it is practice that makes perfect. So you want to practice, practice, practice. So, especially when you don't have anything to do, I always like, you know, when I have some free time, I say, you know, I've been torn with a little idea. Let me go try it out. So you always want to try something out, especially if you're doing something for the first time and your client wants you to do something that you never done before. Of course, you're going to tell them, yes, man. And you go and then you practice. So this one now, we can finish this up with, you can actually use some 3D, some stamens to stick in, or in this case, what I'll finish this one up and do is just to put some little beads in the middle to keep it somewhat simple, but at the same time, enhance in the middle. Because you know, the center of our flower usually have our stamens bunched up in the middle there. So I'm just gonna use my brush to apply some Tylose glue, because you want that to be a little tacky so that it will hold the beads in place. So I'm putting that in and just putting some, and I'm trying to find my tweezers. Now for cake decorating, you'll find that you're crossing all kinds of trade. So we're using carpenter tool, mason tool. I have my trowel. I have my tweezer, which I'm not finding just now. Uh-oh. Well, okay, I'm grabbing these scissors. Something that you can use to grab at your beads to put them in the middle. So we're just using some beads in the middle to act as our stamens. So I'm just dropping them in and then I will arrange them to act as our stamen. So it gives a little bit more interest to your flower. So it somewhat looks like somewhat of a 3D, not just length and breadth flat on the cake, but it's, you know, right. So I've just packed my little beads in the middle to look like my stamen. All right, so that is our brush embroidery. The other thing we need to do now is to finish up our cake. So I'll just put this to the side. And now what I'll be doing is to be doing the string work on the side of the cake. Now I'm just using, sometimes our turntables tend to spin when you don't want it to spin. So I was just anchoring it with something that's a little heavy to prevent it from spinning around. You want to make sure that your royal icing is not too stiff, that it breaks when you pipe the line of icing. So, and it should not be too soft either, that when you pipe, it sags until it breaks. So this is a good enough consistency. So I'm going to squeeze to attach. Then I'm holding it off, squeezing until it is deep enough. Then I attach. And that is how you get your loops really clean and not jagged. So again, I squeeze to attach the icing. Then I'm squeezing. When it's deep enough to match that one, then I attach. If it's not looking as neat as you want it, you can always remove, I'll show you. Then I attach. Okay, so that one broke. So what you need to do is to have your brush, your dampened brush, and you remove. Accidents do happen. And then you just want to flatten so that, because if you have the icing protruding too far off the cake, that bump of icing, then it will cause your string to project out and not be sitting flat onto the cake. So you always want to start, I like to angle it so that the icing is flush onto the cake. If the icing gets too dry at the tip, you want to clean that off so that as you start squeezing, the icing makes contact with the surface, then you can squeeze. When it's deep enough, then you attach. So I'm just going to be finishing up Like I said, if it breaks, because sometimes there are air bubbles in your icing, which will cause it to break. So I'm just going to be going a little faster. Say it again. Going a little faster to ensure that we finish up. So remember the stencil pattern that we used, it had a little design on the top edge, which is what I am doing here. So your stenciling can work in conjunction with your string work or any other technique that you think will enhance or the two will go together well. You could do a double line for it to be more interesting. You could do a double row of string. You could put a mark to know where you had started. Now, if the next one, if you do it on the outside, if it will take you too low, then what you can do is to do it on the inside. So you're making this one a little shorter. Or you could have done the shorter one first. But as I said, if you're not happy with what you see, you can always remove it and start again. So I'm just doing a double row of your string work. Then I'll show you how we'll finish up using some loops at the end of or where the 2 points meet. We'll just finish up with some loops. You notice I'm not tracing the icing. So we have a tendency to go like this with the icing. And that will give you a crooked line. But if you allow the icing to sag, gravity will give you your perfect curve. So see, it will sag on its own. The icing doing all the work for you. So you don't have to worry. You can squeeze your line, you can stop and talk, and then you attach. So it is just at the point that is attached right now. You squeeze the line, then you attach. Squeeze to attach, allow the line to sag, then you attach. And for your cake decorating, you know, some techniques are age old. So they might not be in style now, but years to come, trust me, everybody will be clamoring for, once they get tired of what is now in and what now seems to be fashionable. That's how things are, it changes and goes around. Okay, so what I'll do now is to using the same, I'm using a number 3 tip, by the way. And I'm now going to tidy up these corners just by doing a little loop. You could have allowed the icing to dry. So I'm just allowing again, squeeze to attach. Allow the icing to flow. And then I'm making a little loop. And you can do that. You could do a double loop as well if you wanted to. Or we can finish up with some dots. Got a little air pocket there. But I'm pretending as if I didn't see it. Because I'm not as perfect as you guys are. So, right. So there we go. We're just using a little loop to tidy up our edge so that it looks finished. Right, and as I said, now if you wanted to, you can also use some dots, maybe 2 dots or 3 dots going down. You just want to point your tip towards your cake. I'm using this hand anchored onto the board, a finger up to help to steady this hand so that you don't actually see that I'm shaking. So this hand to steady, and I am squeezing. Now, if the surface has cornstarch on it, it might be a little dry, so it's not sticking. So let's go again, right? 2, 3. And you want to start with a bigger dot and then smaller, then smaller. Just so that it, you know, it tapers down to give a little bit more definition. If it doesn't stick at first, you always have to clean off your tip. Start with a clean tip to get your icing adhering to the surface. Okay. And again, if you're not able to freehand do it, do this just by judgment. I like to say judgment, just by judging, just by eyeballing it, then you probably might want to find a way. There are tools that you can use that could put in the dots for you, so you know where to position the dots. But I like to choose the easy way. I am the easy way out. Right, so we have completely covered. Now, we probably just want to finish up. You don't have to, because here is quite fine. If you look at it, there are no, if you don't have any imperfections, or if for example, you're seeing a little space under there and you want to finish up with a little bead border, you can do that with your royal icing. You probably would want to go back to your darker color, just so that it anchors your cake. I like to say anchor, for want of a better word. You want to anchor your cake so that the darker colors are to the bottom, so it doesn't appear as if the cake is floating in midair. So you want to, so I'm just going to use a little of the brown color. I could even add a little bit more brown so that it ends up a little bit darker than the actual, it doesn't, a little darker than the stenciling. If you want to, you can match it against it to see. Yes, I think I like that. So, was I using a bag? So I need another piping bag to fill with that icing. It's right here. And I'm going to use a larger tip now. So I'll get a little bigger bead border at the base to stabilize my cake and just fill out that little space that's there. So I'm just filling my bag. And I like to turn my bag down on my hand and then pack the icing down. When you're working with the small tips, you don't want to fill your bag too much, because then it's harder to push out and it's more pressure on your hand. So I'm just going to be angling at maybe a 30 to 45 degree angle, and then I'm going to be squeezing and pulling. So it's the same technique that you'd use for your shell border. So you're squeezing and pull, squeeze, pull to make that little bead border. So you want to maintain the same pressure for each bead so that they are similar in size. So you want to pull down on your tip so that it goes into the end of it, goes down instead of sticking up. So I'm squeezing, allowing the icing to spread. Then I move forward just a little bit, and then I'm pulling back. Sometimes it might pull a little short, or you just want the other one to connect right where that one ends. Right? Are you seeing that? Down. Really hoping I'll be able to, I'm helping some of you to improve on your techniques. And we look forward to seeing them coming out in showing up on your cakes for the competition. So I'm using this opportunity to encourage my students to join in on this competition. Join in on this competition from the JCDC office, and go on the website and get the information and make sure you get in your entrance early. okay? Here, as I said, you could put a border as well. You'd want to anchor your cake, of course, by maybe some royal icing underneath it, which we refer to the royal icing as being the decorator's cement, because when it dries really hard. And to prevent it from moving about. So you would want to do that to, like I said, to prevent it from moving. So what we would do is we would lift off your cake, and then you could pipe a little royal icing. Just spread a little, not too much to have it moving all over the place. I'm trying to find my palette knife. Color doesn't matter because it's hidden. It's hidden. And then, okay, so we want to find, you want to look at your cake, you want to spin it around to see where is the front of your cake. But remember now, here is the back. So you want to see where is the front of your cake. So you want to spin it around. You want to spin it around to see where it gives you the best presentation. If there's a part that has any flaws, you want to keep that part to the back. So I'm looking at here where I had missed a few spots. So I probably want to keep this part to the back. So I'm going to put my join to that section. You want to make sure it's centered. If you're not able to eyeball it, you might want to use your measuring tool, a ruler, just to check the measurements all around to ensure that it is. So you have about an inch. So you would check the measurement of going around, or you're able to just stand back and look at it. Do I need to go over some more? Yeah? To the right or to the left? I'm not hearing you, man. Talk back to me. Oh, I forget the cakes are dummies, right? Sorry. Okay. So I think I'm satisfied with that, how that is lining up, but I'm not sure if I like the space here. But what you want to do then is, if you want to be putting a little border, you don't want anything to overpower the cake. Probably the brown, the same color that I used up top, but then I would use a smaller tip, maybe my number 4, to give me back that similar balance. Hoping that this will carry me through. If it doesn't, then you will see at least you are able to look at both sides. You can look at it with the brown, because sometimes that's what I'll have to actually do. Try it out, stand back, look at it, say, is that giving me a pleasing look? How is that? Yes, I think I like that. So I will go with the brown instead of white, because if I had the white here and the white here, I'm thinking that I won't get, and you notice you can see the little space underneath. So we want to get rid of that. So just a smaller tip with the same snail's trail or bead border technique, just to fill out right there so that it looks finished when you're done. I should also mention to you that for the marbling technique, you could have highlighted some of it using maybe your gold or your pearl in the. Now icing seems to be running out, so what I'm going to do is to start at this side instead of continuing and finishing the back first. I'm going to finish this side first, just so that if I run out of icing, then that part will be to the back where hopefully nobody will notice. Right, so I was saying now that what you can do is, if you wanted to, the brown, the darker brown to show up some more in your marbling, any other colors you want to show up more, what you could do is to use a fine brush, a fine tip brush with some of your color to paint in the lines along the same curved lines of the marble in effect. Or if you just wanted to probably use a little gold, using some gold highlighter with a little rum maybe, with your fine brush, and you could put in those lines to enhance the design. So as I said, you would mix your highlighter with a little alcohol, a little rum is what I use. Or lemon extract is what they use overseas because they're not privileged like us to have access to white rum, maybe. So, you know, to mix the gold with and to brush to create that definition along the lines. I'm trying to find that highlighter to show you what I'm talking about. I usually mix it, it's a powder, it comes in a powdered form. And as I said, we'd mix it with some alcohol, or vodka, or if the lemon extract is what you have available to use, something that would evaporate and cause it to dry quickly. But we would put that, mixing it with a little, as I said, some lemon extract, which I'm not seeing in my rum. So I'm going to use water. It may not perform as how it would normally. But I still wanted to show you, you know, how you would. And you could, with a very fine brush, you could paint in on your lines, just to add a little bit more interest. I'm hoping you're able to see that and to see how it enhances your design. Right, so you just put in all over, just following along the same curve of your lines, just a little bit. Sometimes less is more. You don't want too much, just a little bit of enhancement, you know, to introduce a little bit of gold, which would you want a somewhat steady hand so you can follow along the lines. Just to add to our design. You're able to see that? Right. So just doing this side. So all around we are introducing just a little bit of our gold to finish up our design. Okay, so here we have, like I said, we have completed what we have set out to accomplish. We did that's the back of our cake. We want to show you the front. We have done our paneling, our marbling on the side of the cake. We did a darker color on the top, and I could just rest this one on top. The top has the brush embroidery, which you could have also have done on the side of your cake as well. This was the one that I had done earlier. You could have cut it out just to show you how you could have done that design on the front of your cake. This might be a little big, but you know, if we had done it a little smaller, or we can trim down some off of the bottom section. And I'm just looking to find the front of my cake to make a presentation there, so you can see we could have finished this up as well with I'm just using a little glue a little of the Tylose glue on the back. Using a little Tylose glue on the back of my design. Looking for the center back. So this would be the center front. Of course, you would want to use your mat. You could use your mat. And I'm presenting. We could probably still cut a little bit off the top there. If that top is not too cute for you. But if when you stand back and look at it, if it's fine, if it's not too displeasing. And then we could finish up. You could do the actual brush embroidery on this as well. Then we could trim the edge with a darker color of our thingy. But for today, right, we will stop at that. So I'm hoping that you're able to add some techniques to your skills that you already have, or you're able to sharpen some of those. As I said, the brush embroidery that we did on the top, the marbling, the paneling, we did our stenciling and our string work. So thanks for joining with us today. Looking forward to seeing some of your very exciting creative work that you will produce for the competition. Thanks for having me in your homes today. Have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.
Whoopee! Hands go up for Denise Cargill. Put your hands together as we thank her so much for a work of art. The best we save for last. So here we have some persons who are asking in the chat, and she explained the different techniques that she did. The brush embroidery, she did string work, stenciling, paneling, marbling, and she showed you a very simple border using the royal icing. And this is elegant. And as Chef Brown says, we don't have to overdo or overcrowd anything at all. Less is best. That's what Chef says. And this is very elegant. As Mrs. Cargill says, this is why people have to pay for cakes. When you see a lovely design, the time it takes to prepare and to finish the product, you must pay for it. So don't quarrel with anybody when they charge you $200,000 for a cake. They have to spend time, maybe weeks, to put it together. I want to thank you for taking time out to spending the afternoon with us. And I'm sure that many of you would want to be a part of the program with Mrs. Cargill. One person asked if she does baking course. Yes, baking course. She teaches baking course and some level of other cuisines. So you can find her, the Cake Doctor, as I said, and for other information, you will get it if you type in Cake Doctor on our Instagram page. You can find her, and the questions will be answered. So if there are any questions, let me see questions in the chat, because I know a number of persons were asking some questions. All right, so persons were asking questions. So I want to know if we have other questions coming in. Yes, she made it look simple, very simple. All right, she makes it very simple. Just want to remind you that you can go on Facebook and you can watch it. Okay, I'm gonna ask persons to unmute their mic. Thank you. All right, please unmute your mics. So if you want to watch the series from Monday to Thursday, you can go on Facebook Live. You can go on Facebook and you can watch that. Also, you can go on a JCDC site, www.jcdc.gov.jm, and you can watch. Somebody said, zoom in on the cake. All right. And again, this is what we have. All right, there you go. Somebody asked to see a close-up of the cake. All right. I'm just looking to see if we have any more questions. Yes, I know she's an awesome teacher. She takes time out to work with you. Okay, for her next course, she have one going on just now. And if you go onto her page, then you will see when her next course will begin. Okay, you want to see the brush embroidery at the top? All right, we're going to allow you to see the brush embroidery that is on top. All right, yes, he's going to be showing you the brush embroidery, and I'm sure that some persons will want to try the brush embroidery. It is very simple. And then you can, for the competition, you don't have to look at elaborate design. Do something that is simple. Look at that, a work of art with the beads in to give it that 3D effect. So it's a work of art. So it's a brush, the brush technique, and we have to take time. It takes time. So you can't rush into this. And Mrs. Cargill showed you how you use a brush. You brush from the outside in and you go towards the center and you take your time because you need that ridge to help give you that defined effect that we're looking at. All right. Please continue to send in your questions and you will get your answers. You can send a question to the cake doctor. And I should tell you that if you have any difficulty, once you start the course with her and you face roadblocks, which I've seen many persons face, call her. She does not hesitate. She's going to say, come over, and she is going to take it from there. And she's going to assist you, and she's going to help you to let your product look as good as the one that she did just now. So don't be afraid to, as I said earlier, we need to step outside the box. Maybe some of you wanted to try your hands at cake decorating over the years, but now is the time for you to step outside your comfort zone and get into the cake decorating. Okay, now for the competition, the handbook, you can get that. It's on the website. It's for 2021. It's excerpts for this year. It's solo entry. Remember, individual persons entering. High schoolers, we are not having children, we are not having groups. So community groups, your churches, colleges, universities, but it is a solo entry for this year. The categories are there. On Monday, we looked at knife skills technique. Tuesday, we looked at garnishing techniques. Wednesday, we look at recipe writing and plate presentation. And here today, we looked at cake decorating. So for the competition, we are going to be having batters and doughs. We'll have traditional category. We have the knife skills technique. We have celebration cake, like one that was done today. And then we have recipe writing. And this is for 2021. Because we are going through this pandemic, we don't know what next year holds. So we work with the 2021. So we are going to be doing Zoom competitions. So as soon as the dates are ready, available, it will be posted on the website. So we are giving you some more time for you to try out a recipe, try out a skill. If you want to do the cake decorating, try your skill, work over and over. And I should tell you, even though you have your fondant and you work with the fondant, say white fondant, and you have some red on it, wrap it in cling wrap, put it in your refrigerator. When you want it to take it out, soften it up, knead it, you use it again, because you want to practice the technique until you get it. Clear, everybody? Do you all understand? I'm sure you have enjoyed this session. Now, I want to thank you on behalf of Cultural Development Commissions for sitting in this online space and be a part of 2021 Culinary Arts Workshop. On behalf of my technical team, the cameramen, the sound, the ICT, and for those who are not here, but working. Thank you so much. Thank you all again, and God bless you. And I see you when we have competition. God bless you. Have a blessed night. Thank you all.
Off your knees, you ain't gotta cry to me. I ain't giving all my love. Tell me, do you feel it? Never attention. Off of you, I take a slug, baby. Who the realest? Had to tell her how much shitty I got. I'm the wish. Being in love never helped me solve my problems. I was dead, I just find a girl just like my mom. I don't wanna hurt nobody, but still tell her with that type of. So like to the end, till I'm free to main sniper. Because
Early in the morning as I wake, I take myself away to a secret place. And there I lay flat on my face and wait with the only aim to see God's face. Starting my daily activities, here come the challenges, the devil presenting himself. I mute the negative, speaking God's promises. Everybody join the praise train. I'm in a praising mood.